I'm Carrie Melks. This is number 0692, the Stuff File program with Peter Anthony Holder, and it comes to you right now.
The following program is brought to you in living color.
Now, it's time for an eclectic mix of interviews and some of the oddest news stories you'll ever hear. It's the Stuff File program with Peter Anthony Holder.
Hey there, hi there, ho there! Peter Anthony Holder here with you, and yes, this is indeed another edition of the Stuff File program, number 0692. And coming up on this edition of the Stuff File program, you'll meet investigative journalist Julian Sher, who has produced the documentary Kings of Coke about Montreal's West End gang, who ran the drug trade in this city for decades.
What was so particular about the West End gang is this was a group that could only have been born in Montreal and in a very specific section of Montreal, Point St. Charles, the West End. And they grew out of this poor working class, impoverished area, became bank robbers, and then they were just at the right place in the right time. They controlled the port, and when cocaine started, they became international crime lords. And that's what was so amazing about their story.
Mark Everglade is the author of Inertia, the science fiction novel that explores an ecological crisis of epic proportions. The story takes place on the last remaining colony of the human race, located 20 light years from Earth.
It follows a young scientist, Ash Rivenshire. She's trying to figure out why the planet is spinning faster every day. There's 3 sunrises, and then there's 4 sunrises a day, 6 sunrises a day. It's spinning faster and faster, and that's causing all sorts of problems with the environment. Ash uncovers a conspiracy. She hacks some government servers, gets into some data she shouldn't find, some classified files, and ends up finding a conspiracy between the government and the whole rotation of the planet and the global warming, and the economic connection between those things.
Science writer Andrew Fazekas, the night sky guy, talks about his latest book, the massive tome entitled National Geographic's Stargazer Atlas, the ultimate guide to the night sky.
The overarching theme of this book is humanity's deep connection to the night sky from the past, present, and future. So we included what you would normally think is in an atlas, which includes maps. The heart of the book is different kinds of maps of the night sky and other celestial objects like moons and planets, of course, but then complement that with chapters that deal with things like astrotourism. That's basically things where people can go and travel the world, but with an astronomical theme in mind.
And there's lots and lots of Stuff File news and, of course, an idiot of the day. The guest slater, the person who told you this was show number 0692, was Carrie Melks, who works at the box office at the Thousand Islands Playhouse, Canada's Dockside Theatre, located in Gananoque, Ontario. Thank you very much, Carrie, for doing the guest slate on this edition of the Stuff File program, a show that is listener-supported, fan-funded radio that depends on you for our success. Join us at patreon.com to help make this show an even bigger and better radio experience. Well, let's get right to the stuff. You know we must be on the cusp of American Thanksgiving when you hear of stories like this. A drive-by turkey shooting. A Cheshire County, New Hampshire man is facing multiple charges after being accused of shooting a turkey from a car window. New Hampshire has 2 turkey hunting seasons, one for shotguns and one for archery. Right now, hunters aren't allowed to use firearms to shoot turkeys. New Hampshire Fish and Game Captain Michael Eastman said that even if they were, the man used a gun he would never be allowed to hunt with. Conservation officers said the man used a 9mm handgun. Officers learned about the alleged poaching after getting a tip from a concerned citizen. Eastman said he also believes the man fired the gun within 300 feet of a home, which is against the law. You know, I must confess, nobody in my family are turkey eaters. It's just not our thing. Some people agree with us, and some people don't.
Turkeys are beautiful, intelligent animals.
No, they're not. They're ugly and stupid and delicious.
A woman found with hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of cocaine in the tires of her wheelchair has been arrested. Emelinda Paulino de Rivas was pulled over by customs officials at JFK Airport in New York after they noticed the wheels of her wheelchair were no longer spinning properly. An X-ray revealed tubes of cocaine weighing 28 pounds packed inside the chair's wheels with an estimated street value of $450,000. De Rivas had arrived at JFK on a flight from Punta Cana in her home country of the Dominican Republic. She now faces federal narcotics smuggling charges and will be prosecuted by the U.S. Attorney's Office in the U.S. Eastern District Court of New York. Wow, 28 pounds of cocaine packed in her wheelchair. I guess that's just how she rolls. America had its midterm elections on November the 8th. It's not particularly surprising that Pennsylvania State Representative Tony DeLuca, a Democrat, was reelected, considering that in his district, in which 60% of registered voters are Democrats, they had no Republicans even running against him. It's perhaps a little more surprising that he was reelected despite having died last month. Because he was already on the ballot, state law required that he stay there despite his death at 85 from lymphoma. The state plans to run a special election early next year to fill the seat. Said Allegheny County's Commission's Director Amy Downs, "It's not the first time it's happened. It's happened numerous times." Really? Is it because voters think that dead politicians don't do as much stupid things as live ones? You know, it's interesting how there are so many conspiracy theories with no basis of fact that hordes of dead voters are casting ballots in an election, but no one bats an eye at a dead nominee. Meanwhile,
to say don't vote for the dead guy is a little harsh, but it's not about him any longer. It is about what the impact to this community will be.
Oh, you think this is the same story? No, it's not. What you just heard is Kevin O'Neill of Chula Vista, California. He's referring to Simon Silva, who was running for city attorney. He died of cancer on September the 3rd and could not be stricken from the ballot. O'Neill actually started an online campaign called Don't Vote for the Dead Guy. The dead guy's opponent, Dan Smith, was pretty magnanimous.
If somebody wanted to vote for Mr. Silva, he's a good man. After knowing that he was deceased, after knowing that the special election would cost him $2 million, I'm willing to accept that.
Yet Smith put his own attorney skills to work, putting out a cease and desist letter to the Democratic Party that said he would like them to curtail any further campaigning on Mr. Silva's behalf. It didn't work. The mayor and others still endorsed the dead guy. Said Smith,
"It's a nonpartisan position and a nonpartisan job. As an attorney, you don't throttle back your representation of somebody because they are the member of another party."
At press time, final results aren't in, but Silva leads Smith with 50.5% of the vote, and if he does win, the city will have to hold a special election to fill the position at an estimated cost of $2 million. My question is, how much therapy do all these candidates who lose to dead people have to go through for their self-esteem to return? Anyway, let's get to our first guest here in this edition of the Stuff File program, shall we? Julian Sher is an award-winning investigative journalist and veteran TV documentary writer and director who has a new film that is available on Crave. It's called Kings of Coke, and it deals with Montreal's Irish mafia who ruled this city's cocaine trafficking network and were brutally territorial, mowing down anyone who got in their way. Julian joins us via Zoom from right here in Montreal to talk about it. Hi, Julian.
Hey, great to be with you.
Great to have you on the program with us. I remember distinctly what was going on at the time with the West End gang because we all lived through it. But I guess to a certain degree, it's probably a lot worse than it was, or we thought it was.
I think it was, I think for most Montrealers, look, I've been born and raised in Montreal. I love the city, as most of us do. But I think, we try to tell myths to ourselves, and we try to hide the dark side of our city. And I think it's important that we kind of face up to what our past is all about. And what's remarkable about Kings of Coke, about the West End Gang, is you think of the big international crime organizations, right? If I say organized crime to you, what do you think of? You think of the mafia, the Hells Angels. I wrote 2 books on the Hells Angels, right? And did a documentary on them. But these were big international groups that basically franchised out their operation to groups in Montreal or any other city. What was so particular about the West End Gang is this was a group that could only have been born in Montreal and in a very specific section of Montreal, Point St. Charles, the West End. And they grew out of this poor working class, impoverished area, became bank robbers. And then they were just at the right place in the right time. They controlled the port. And when cocaine started, they became international crime lords. And that's what was so amazing about their story.
One of the things that makes Montreal attractive to be a cocaine hub, a smuggling hub in general, is the fact that it is indeed a port city. Other port cities have that moniker as well for their crime. I would assume, because we're talking about Irish gangs here, I would assume there's an equal grouping of people doing exactly the same thing in Boston.
Absolutely. In fact, their connection to Boston was very important, even when it came to their bank robbery days. But you're so right about the port. Sure, there's a lot of cocaine and drugs and other illegal stuff that comes through the land borders, through the airport. But if you look at the big ports around the world and even in Canada, Vancouver, Halifax, Montreal, control of the port is vital, because you have massive amounts of cargoes and cargo ships going through. And the Irish working class, who grew up in the West End and the Point, worked in the Point for many, many years. And what happened is the West End Gang and some other criminal elements began to get control of the Union and the port. And suddenly, in the 1970s and the 1980s, powerful groups like the Mafia and the Hells Angels had to go almost begging, cap in hand. and the West End Gang was able to set up almost a kind of toll gate, right, where they would take a percentage of the cocaine that these gangs were moving in. What was so impressive, though, and in the movie we show you this prosecutor from Florida who's investigating the Colombian gangs, and suddenly he sees these Irish names from Montreal who are going down and negotiating directly with the Colombians. And he was stunned. He'd never see Canadians doing it. So what the Irish West End Gang started doing is they started getting their own cocaine trafficking network. And that's what made them so powerful, but also, frankly, so violent.
Besides their brutality, one of their, I guess, strengths, I'm assuming, is the fact that, unlike, for instance, the bikers, this gang could blend in with the rest of society and also were very giving to their community, so that they were respected to a certain degree by those around them.
Respected and feared, but you make a very good point, Peter, because you think of the Hells Angels. So yes, they're local boys, but if you look at, and I've been to some of them, you look at their clubhouses, these are fortresses, right? Forts in the middle of communities. The West End Gang came from the Point and then expanded. They lived for the longest time in the community. They were renowned for giving out Christmas turkeys for those that needed it. Look, at one point, one of their members was on trial, and a Catholic priest came to serve as a character witness. So it showed their connections to the community. But in the documentary, we tell the story of a very well-known woman who came out of the Point and became a writer. And she points out how this Robin Hood aspect of them was a bit of a myth, because most of the people stayed poor. They were also able to terrorize the community because they had such roots in it. But it did mean, as you pointed out, that they were rooted in the community. It made it much harder for the police to infiltrate and try to take them down.
To be a successful documentarian of subjects like this, as you are, you have to dig deep and find information. You have to talk to people, and you're talking about criminal elements here. Is there ever a concern on behalf of your own safety or the safety of those you are talking to that you're getting information from, even all these years later? Because some of these gangs, while they may be not as powerful or defunct from when they were very, very powerful, still have far-reaching tentacles.
Sure. I mean, the documentary follows the work of many journalists, especially a friend of mine, a colleague of mine named Dan Burke. Dan and I worked together on CBC's The Fifth Estate, and we started investigating the West End gang back in the 90s. I don't want to give away the climax of the movie, but you'll see some of the tragic consequences that came about because of our investigation into the corruption and into the power of the West End gang. So sure, there's an element of danger and fear, but it's our job. It's what we have to do. As you know, there was a well-known Montreal journalist, Michel Auger, who was gunned down and nearly killed by the Hells Angels. So look, organized crime doesn't like people like us poking, into their dark underworld. But we have to do it. We don't take unnecessary risks. We have precautions. And as you point out, we also especially have to take care and protect the people who are willing to talk to us. But it's important to tell these stories. I always I try to see myself telling stories and going to places that people can't go to. So I go to Afghanistan and tell you about the Taliban. I go through Africa and tell you about wars there. But if I can do the same thing in my own city, if I can take your listeners to a part of Montreal, even if they're from Montreal and they don't know the history of the point. They don't know the history of the West End gang. Well, that's important. And some of us just have to take those risks so those stories can be told.
You mentioned that you have written and done films on the Hells Angels and other groups beforehand. Even though the West End gang is one of the most heinous groups around, why wait so long to do this? Why haven't you done this before?
Well, partly because you're busy doing so many other things and so many other documentaries and writing books. I actually have a new book coming out on Montreal as a kind of Casablanca during the American Civil War and all the spying and sabotage that went on. So you're always digging for stories and you have to find the right time and the right place. One of the advantages of doing this documentary now, Kings of Coke, is that so many of the members are either in jail or dead. So it was a lot easier to approach people and get people to talk. It was a lot easier to talk to former police officers, former gang members, and even retired journalists. So there is sometimes an advantage. Yes, I have written and did stories on the Hells Angels in the midst of the biker wars when it was important. But doing a historical doc like this, there was a certain advantage of doing this in 2022, in many ways, years after. Plus, frankly, it's a lot of fun. I think when people watch the documentary, you see Montreal in black and white at Sin City in the 50s, and then in color at the kind of bank robber and cocaine capital in the 60s and 70s. So there's a bit of a delight. There's a bit of time travel that we engage in. So that was fun.
We're just about out of time, and you've done so many stories dealing with some of the criminal elements of Montreal. As you know, any situation abhors a vacuum. These gangs are supposedly no longer the powerful gangs that they were. Is something taking its place?
Yes, largely the Hells Angels and the Mafia have taken over or returned to their powerful role at the top of the organized crime pyramid, especially the Hells Angels, because of a lot of the infighting that's going on in the Mafia. What's actually quite stunning is the current unofficial leader of the Hells Angels, Salvatore Cazzetta, was actually arrested. He was working with the West End gang in the early 90s. There was a huge cocaine trafficking deal that he was involved in. He gets busted along with the West End gang and gets sent to Florida because of the arrest for 10 years. And that, remarkably, is what saves his life during the biker war. And when he comes back, All his enemies are dead or in jail. He takes over the Hells Angel, and to this day is one of really the suspected kings of coke. So in an ironic way, the West End gang have passed on the throne, if you want, to the new kings of coke. And that's why we have to keep watching what's going on in our city, because, unbeknownst to us, there is still this dark underworld that lives and breathes inside our city, and we have to pay attention.
It's a fascinating story. The documentary on Crave is called The Kings of Coke. Thank you very much, Julian, for taking the time to be on the program with us.
Great to talk about such an important topic. Stay safe, everyone.
Investigative journalist Julian Sher. His film is Kings of Coke, and it is available on Crave. Check your local listings. You can go to my website at thestuffile.com to the page for this show, which is show number 0692, and you'll find links to Julian's site where you can find out more information on both his films and his books. You're listening to the Stuff File program with me, Peter Anthony Holder.
There's still more guests, more news, and an idiot of the day coming your way on the Stuff File program. Stay tuned. The Stuff File program is a listener-supported, fan-funded radio show that depends on you for our success. Join us at patreon.com to help make this show an even bigger and better radio experience. Sign up and find out about our rewards program. Being a patron doesn't have to be a long-term commitment. There's absolutely no obligation. You could join today and end whenever you'd like. But the time we have your support would be so greatly appreciated. We'd also love to hear your thoughts about the show and even your ideas for rewards. Join us for the ride. Join us at patreon.com/The Stuff File program.
Mishak here. In the interest of world peace, you're listening to my uncle, Peter Anthony Holder. You can't have war when you have a smile on your face. So listen to Peter for a chuckle or two. Also, I suggest you carry a helium balloon on a stick. Have you ever seen a sad person with a helium balloon? I rest my case. Here's Peter.
Thank you, my little rugrat. And still to come on the program, we'll meet the author of Inertia, a science fiction novel, plus Andrew Fazekas, the Night Sky Guy, is here with his brand new book. We also have an Idiot of the Day and much more in Stuff File News right here, right now. Argentina is known for a lot of things, from tango to its love of soccer, but you probably didn't know that it's also home to the world's drunkest drivers. Now, back in March of this year, Argentinian media reported that a young man from the town of Plotier had broken the world breathalyzer record after scoring an unprecedented 5.79 grams of alcohol per liter of breath when tested by police after crashing his car in a ditch. Wow, this is a guy who apparently had blood in his alcohol stream. Anyway, despite suffering minor injuries to his face and arms because of the crash, he refused medical assistance and did not cooperate with the police. However, he would not get to brag about his unusual record for too long because it was just earlier this month a fellow Argentinian broke it again. On the evening of November the 7th, police in General Roca, Rio Negro, received a distress call about a motorist acting erratic in the Bagliani neighborhood. According to eyewitnesses, he was driving on the wrong side of the road, as well as on a section of train tracks, and had almost run over a young girl. At around 11:30 p.m., police officers managed to track down and pull over the driver of a red Volkswagen van. That alone can be considered quite a feat considering the state that the man, whose identity was not disclosed, was in at the time. Although the officers could tell that the man was inebriated, they had no idea that they were in the presence of a world record holder. Upon carrying out a breathalyzer test, police officers were stunned to see that the man had a blood alcohol content level of 6.26 grams of alcohol per liter of breath. They were so shocked that they had him do the test again just to be sure. The result was the same. A new world breathalyzer record was confirmed. Eyewitnesses told reporters that the driver was driving at the wheel and was so drunk that he couldn't articulate a single word when pulled over by police. He also couldn't walk by himself, so he was carried to the police car by police officers. The man's driver's license and his vehicle were seized, and it will probably be a while until he can legally get behind the wheel again. Well, at least he has the world breathalyzer test to comfort himself with. Harris County, Texas Sheriff's Office investigators quickly figured out who the shooter was in a road rage incident. A 911 caller said that they were run off the road by another vehicle with two men inside. There was an argument, and a passenger in the victim's vehicle opened fire toward the two men who were outside the driver's window. The passenger landed a bullet in his own driver's hand. 32-year-old passenger Daniel Rosales Robledo allegedly shot his brother-in-law who was at the wheel. He did not hit the two other men. All parties have been detained, with Robledo arrested and charged with aggravated assault. Remember the gang who couldn't shoot straight? Well, this is a case of a moron who thought he could shoot around objects or people. Anyway, the bell signifies that it's time once again for the Darwin File.
I am the Grim Reaper. I am death.
Social media has claimed yet another life. In Texas, a dancing man on top of an 18-wheeler slammed into a bridge, Wile E. Coyote style, and later died. The 25-year-old either jumped or climbed onto a moving 18-wheeler before starting to dance, but when the semi-trailer traveling south on the East Tex Freeway passed underneath a bridge, the dancing man slammed into the overpass and was knocked off the vehicle. He landed on the freeway below. He was rushed to hospital, where he was later pronounced dead. Authorities said they believe the man might have been recording himself as he danced atop the truck. A video shared on Facebook shows the man dancing on the semi-trailer before the fatal incident. What price fame. Social media is really culling the herd because, as you know, the tree of life is often self-pruning.
I have come for you. I am death.
Anyway, let's get to our next guest here in this edition of the Stuff All program, shall we? Mark Everglade is the author of Inertia, a novel that explores an ecological crisis of epic proportions. It's a futuristic story that takes place on the last remaining colony of the human race, located 20 light years from Earth. To talk about the novel, Mark joins us via Skype from Florida. Hi, Mark.
Hi, Peter. Thanks for having me. How are you?
Just tickety-boo. Thanks for being on the program with us.
Absolutely.
I always often ask science fiction writers this question because a lot of stories that takes place in science fiction taking place in the future are somewhat dystopian. So right off the bat, I just got to ask you, do you consider yourself a positive person or an optimist or a pessimist?
That's an excellent question, and I consider myself a bit of a realist, and there is some pessimism that comes out of that. I'm optimistic when I look at the future, Peter, and the possibility and potential of the human race. But then I do get pessimistic when I look at the day-to-day problems, here on the brink of World War III, perhaps. There's certainly a certain fear and pessimism there day to day. But long term, I'd like to say that things are improving.
I gave a brief synopsis of your book, Inertia. Can you tell us what the story is about?
Oh, absolutely, Peter. Inertia is a book that asks, how would you solve the problem of global warming in space, in deep space? And, it follows a young scientist, Ash Rivenshire, and she's trying to figure out why the planet is spinning faster every day. There's 3 sunrises, and then there's 4 sunrises a day, 6 sunrises a day. It's spinning faster and faster. And that's causing all sorts of problems with the environment. And, Ash uncovers a conspiracy. She hacks some government servers, gets into some data she shouldn't find, some classified files, right? And ends up finding a conspiracy between the government and the whole rotation of the planet and the global warming and the economic connection between those things. So that's, interesting on rationally. But emotionally, there's a whole emotional story there because Ash needs to rely on her father, who doesn't know she exists, in order to solve this crisis, because her father was one of the greatest scientists that the planet ever had. And so here she's trying to establish a relationship with her father, while at the same time, the more she knows, the more her life is put at risk by the powers that be.
Now,
and so it's very dystopian.
As I said, this takes place on the last remaining colony of the human race located 20 light years from Earth. So what has happened to Earth?
Well, Earth, essentially, there was a problem where it became non-inhabitable anymore due to plague. And I wrote the first one in this series a few years before COVID, but the idea that plague had taken over, but it was a bioterrorist action resulting from wars that made the Earth uninhabitable. And then there were other areas where nuclear disaster and just the use of nuclear power and all of the spills, etc., had made large portions of the planet inhabitable. So essentially, they're forced to leave Earth. But how do you decide, Peter, who is going to leave the planet and colonize a new planet? Do you choose the smartest people on the planet? Do you choose the richest people? Do you choose at random and make it fair? How do you decide? And there was no great consensus, and there was just a hodgepodge of random people who fled the planet. And so you end up with a kind of Wild West mentality in space, because there wasn't really any reasoning as to why people were chosen.
Well, speaking of how do you decide, in doing a little bit of research on you and looking back into your history, I understand that at the age of 11, you started writing alternate endings to just about everything?
Well, Peter, it's really what we would call fan fiction today. And as a young man, it gave me the ability to really dive deep into existing stories. And these would kind of become the templates or structure that I would use for stories when I was older.
So how would you feel if people decided to start rewriting the endings of your work?
I would love it. I mean, I think that imitation is the best flattery. And I think that we are all standing on the shoulders of giants when it comes to the creative process. My wife actually came up with a lot of my ideas for my work, including the basic idea of hemispheres between the idea of the tidal locked planet and the daylight cycles and all. And so we're all, collaborating on this. Some of us acknowledge that, and sometimes it's unconscious where we're taking ideas and don't know it. So I don't really believe that one person owns their idea 100%. Most of what's been done has been done before. And so, I'd be pretty honored, I think. Speaking
of having your wife work on some of your stories, and you're not necessarily a plotter, are you? You are a seat-of-the-pants type of writer? You never outline books?
Absolutely not. But I've had to start. Working on this second book, Inertia, in this cyberpunk sequel, when you're dealing with a trilogy, it's even more important to start planning not only that book, but 3 books in the future. You have to plan the whole series at once. So I have forced myself to, constrain my creativity to a more planning process. And it has saved me so much time.
And in forcing yourself to do this, do you find that your writing is somehow different from what you normally did before that?
Yes, I find that it's more structured, it's more coherent, but perhaps it's a bit less passionate at the same time, because you are connecting plot element A with plot element B, and it becomes a rational exercise. How do you connect the points in the outline rather than an expressive exercise of writing? So there is a downside for me.
Now, you mentioned Cyberpunk earlier. You also run Cyberpunk Day each year. Tell us about Cyberpunk Day.
Absolutely. The day is run by a small group who we are trying to connect the community and bring people together around dystopian literature and dystopian media, games, video games, music, to be able to get some exposure for artists, but also to let the community have conversations about things like classic movies like The Matrix, Blade Runner, RoboCop, Total Recall, these things that are staples in cyberpunk. It's great to find a community that's so engaged in these classics.
Well, it's interesting that you brought up those films, because I'm just wondering, from your perspective, especially someone who writes science fiction. Do you find that a lot of the titles you just described, do you find that they stand up well over time?
Most of them do. Special effects-wise, no, they may not. Acting-wise, no. But when you look at the ideas are so similar. What is our relationship to technology? What does it mean to be human in the face of all of this technology? Like the average person, Peter, spends 2.5 hours a day on social media. How do things like that, technology, influence people and their interactions with one another and their relationship to society? That's what a lot of this is about.
What do you feel, or how do you feel about technology? Do you find it's a good thing, bad thing, or it depends on basically whose hands it's in?
Yeah, it is the latter. It is a double-edged sword. It is a tool. I mean, like a gun, it is a tool, and it can be used for a variety of purposes. And overall, it has a tremendous ability to connect people. We wouldn't be having this conversation, even 20 years ago, or maybe 25, 20 years ago. So technology allows for connection, but at the same time, it is isolating people, and people can become very isolated and dependent on it. And the next thing you know, people are, addicted to their phones, and they're bringing them out at dinner conversation, and they're not having that real heartfelt relationship face to face.
Again, Inertia is part of a trilogy. So where does it stand in the trilogy?
It is the second.
And so tell us about the first book a little bit, and what's the third one?
The first one is called Hemispheres, and I have my books outlined on my website, markeverglade.com, where I review over 100 science fiction books in this genre. And the first book is about essentially this planet that half of it is always nighttime and half of it is always daytime, and how that impacts the cultures that develop on each side of the planet, and how those who have light and those who do not have light interact with one another and exploit one another for natural resources.
Interesting concept indeed. So the first one is called?
Hemispheres.
And this one is called Inertia. And what will the third one be called?
I was thinking Hydrosphere, but I think that it sounds too similar to the first one, so I'll have to figure out a name.
So you're still working on that one?
Yes, sir.
In the meantime, people can enjoy the first two. The second one is called Inertia. It's now available. Mark, I thank you very, very much for taking the time to be on the program with us.
Thank you, Peter. It's been an honor and a pleasure.
Mark Everglade, author of Inertia. You can go to my website at thestufffile.com to the page for this show, which is show number 0692, and you'll find the links to Mark's site, plus links to either Amazon.com or Amazon.ca, where you can order his books directly. You're listening to the Stuff File program with me, Peter Anthony Holder.
Portions of the Stuff File program are available to you via Audia.io. At Audia, you'll find hundreds and hundreds of Stuff File program interviews going all the way back to 2009. That's Audia, AUDEA.io. There's more Stuff File program coming your way right after this break.
Here's a brief word about our show and my book. If you become a regular Patreon patron of the Stuff File program, I'll give you an e-version of my book, Great Conversations, my interviews with 2 men on the moon and a galaxy of stars. It's easy to do. Just go to patreon.com and become a patron to help make this show an even bigger and better radio experience. So, join Patreon and claim your copy of Great Conversations, my interviews with 2 men on the moon and a galaxy of stars. Sign up at patreon.com/The Stuff File program.
Latitude 47 degrees 14 minutes north. Longitude 84 degrees 39 minutes west. Location Montreal, Canada. This is the Stuff File program with Peter Anthony Holder. Now, the Stuff File presents Andrew Fazekas, the Night Sky Guy. It's radio that's out of this world.
Andrew Fazekas, the Night Sky Guy, is a member of the Royal Astronomical Society of Canada and the author of National Geographic's Backyard Guide to the Night Sky. But he's here today to talk about his new book, which is called Stargazer's Atlas, The Ultimate Guide to the Night Sky, which, by the way, is another National Geographic title. Hi, Andrew.
Hey there, Peter.
Congratulations on the new book.
Thank you.
We usually talk about the solar system, but right now, everything revolves around you.
Oh, my goodness. That's a lot to live up to.
We're talking about just you today. First of all, Back in the days in the old radio show, when we did book banter with Stuart and Ullman, whenever we did the coffee table books, which is usually the show we did for Christmas, we always had the books in the studio, and we used to do the drop test. We would drop the book on the desk to see how much of a thud it would make. I would assume that your book, Stargazer's Atlas, The Ultimate Guide to the Night Sky, would succeed winningly in the drop test. How heavy is this book?
It's 6.5 pounds of cosmic knowledge.
And you were saying to me off air before that this was about the weight of your second child.
That's right. My second daughter. That's right. She weighed in about 6.5 pounds when she was born. And I'm going, but this one took longer. The birthing process was was quite arduous, I think. But I don't know. I think Zoe, my wife, might disagree.
Okay. So let's talk about this. Again, Stargazer's Atlas, The Ultimate Guide to the Night Sky. Tell us about this book and how it came to be and how it differs, because, some people who aren't stargazers don't know the difference between one book and another. They just see titles. So how is this different from some of the books you've done in the past?
The story behind this book is really that I've been working with National Geographic for, I think it's been now almost 14 years. And I've been their go-to stargazing columnist and also doing some, astronomy news as well here and there, but mostly stargazing and basically pointing out for people what they can see in the night sky from across the world. And I've written a couple of other books for them before, but then there was this interest in something that would be all-encompassing in terms of the night sky. And they came to me going, well, they're interested in doing an atlas potentially, but some kind of atlas that really brings together a comprehensive knowledge of the night sky. They came to me asking, what do I think and how would it go? And one of the things that really I said right off the bat, I think we need to make this like truly comprehensive and go beyond what a traditional atlas is, because there are, just like you had brought up, to those that may not be so into astronomy, perhaps one book may look like the other in terms of night sky knowledge and stargazing and stuff. So I wanted to make this different. And so what we decided to do is we brought in a team of people, and I'm really excited. I'm the lead author on this book, but I am joined by a few other experts in different fields. And I wanted to include this into a one comprehensive guide. So really the overarching theme of this book is humanity's deep connection to the night sky from the past, present, and future. So we included what you would normally think is in an atlas, which includes the maps. And of course, National Geographic is so well known for their cartography. That's the central core. The heart of the book is different kinds of maps of the night sky and other celestial objects like moons and planets, of course. But then complement that with chapters that deal with things like astrotourism. That's basically things where people can go and travel the world, but with an astronomical theme in mind. Archaeoastronomy, for instance, connections around the world from different cultures to astronomy. There are these archaeological sites you can go and visit, the ancient observatories and temples that are dedicated to celestial bodies. Then there's also the explanation of our tour of the solar system through robotic missions over the many decades. That's been covered very extensively by National Geographic over the years, and just to be able to put that into the book as well, and then basic science knowledge that we've accumulated right up to date on all these different strange objects that you can see in the night sky. So we've kind of combined everything, all these different expertise into one. And of course, at the heart is an atlas. But what's really cool is that we do cover the entire night sky, all 88 constellations that are visible from every corner of the world, both northern and southern hemisphere, is equally covered. So literally anyone around the world can take this book and plan a tour of the night sky and understand what humanity's connection to the night sky is, and plan out their own cosmic adventures, whether it be going out to the backyard and looking up and finding constellations and treasures for themselves, or actually packing their bags and going somewhere around the world to a dark sky preserve, for instance, where the skies are truly dark. So it's a really great, I think, overarching kind of book that hasn't been done before. And of course, it's packed with, rich imagery that only National Geographic, through their extensive libraries, were able to gather into one collection. And I'm really fortunate. A lot of my astrophotographic friends' photographs are in here. The front cover is actually one of my good friends who's a premier photographer at National Geographic, Babek Trafreshi. He's done the cover for us. And it's just a fantastic, comprehensive guide to everything the night sky has to offer. And it's 6.5 pounds. So, Peter, this is not something that you would put in your back pocket or pack away in your backpack for travel, per se, but it's something that you would curl up on a cloudy day, a night, on the sofa, and then really just pick this book up, here and there, and learn a little bit about the night sky in little morsels that are digestible.
Well, I think you kind of answered my next question, but I'll re-ask it in a different way, and that is, even though it's a coffee table book, it's not a book to literally just sit on your coffee table. It is, and it's not just something simply to read. It's something to utilize and also put into implementation what the book has to offer. So for someone out there who is a newbie to this, who like for instance, if you have a child who seems to be interested in stargazing, giving this child that book, what's the first thing that you should try to do from this book if you're a newbie?
If you're a total newbie, I would just relax. There's no planned attack on how you're gonna enter this, this world, your own cosmic journey. Let it take you where it takes you. I mean, there are chapters here that, for instance, go into the explanation of what stars are, how they live through their life cycle. Another chapter that talks about the sun, moon, and earth, or another separate one that explains all the other planets in the solar system and the moons with maps of them. And then we go into the night sky, being able to find things in the night sky, different really cool things that you can go out, everything from satellites that travel by, rocket boosters human-made objects, to distant galaxies across the universe, and how you can travel, almost like a travel guide to around different places in the world, and looking into the future as well. So I would, if you're new to amateur astronomy and you want to go out and plan what you're going to be seeing, you've got something for that. You want something to inspire you and kind of give you that kind of sense of awe and wonder. We have that in the book as well, in terms of looking at the beauty, the sheer beauty of the of the night sky and the universe. That's there too. So it really depends on what you wanted. But I would, just to get your excitement up, is really just flipping through the book. And the way we've designed it is that there are morsels of information, digestible morsels. You don't have to spend a lot of time, 5-10 minutes with the book in one sitting, and you'll pick up something new, really cool information about the night sky.
And the reason why I asked that last question is a question that I don't think we've discussed in the last couple of years, and I'm just wondering if you have any data on this, or if you know about this at all, and that is, do we know if there was an uptick, an increase in people who decided that they wanted to try stargazing? Because we were locked in our homes for 2 years for the most part, and this was something that you could literally, as one of your previous book titles said, go into your own backyard and explore.
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't think there's any hardcore numbers out there, but there's definitely, if you look across the astronomy industry, there is a huge uptick in sales of telescopes and binoculars, unlike anything that's been seen before. It's like every day is like Christmas for a lot of these telescope manufacturers, because there's just so much interest throughout the year. And yes, during the pandemic, there was a significant increase in the interest in this hobby. And it really fits well with what, we went through during the pandemic, in that we were, sheltered. We weren't allowed to do our normal entertaining things that are usually very social. So we went online, and astronomy websites popped up where there were live streams through telescopes, where people could see see through a telescope virtually from using just their digital device that's connected to the internet. Also, the sales of these instruments like binoculars really took off. People were interested just from the backyard, and it was a family thing too. What we've seen is that it's been something that's picked up at all ages. Even youngsters with their parents are now going out and observing. We've seen an increase in astronomy club memberships, the general public coming out to a star party that's being put on by amateur astronomy clubs. So there's a definite uptick because of the pandemic. It kind of makes sense too, is that in the last decade or so, the internet the access of astronomy has increased tremendously because of it. It's sort of the true democratization of the night sky. It's so funny, Peter, because, we're living in a society where we're more disconnected from nature than ever before. Most of the world's population lives in or near giant cosmopolitan areas where there's so much light pollution, and people just don't look up anymore. And the internet has given us access to the universe like we've never seen. So look at, just as a great example, on my personal Night Sky Guy Facebook page, I saw through one of my feeds from NASA was a wonderful image I came across of the Artemis mission taking a snapshot from the Orion capsule back towards the Earth. And it was already a quarter of the way to the moon. And I posted that, and within 24 hours, I had over 18,000 likes on that one picture. That kind of interest and thousands of comments and people looking at it, and it's really putting things into perspective. And there's hardly a week that you don't go by and see a launch of a rocket, SpaceX launching something, or James Webb Space Telescope putting out another awe-inspiring image. People are drawn to this unlike ever before. So there's this natural curiosity that people have. They feel that it's accessible. And for folks like me who are an astronomy communicator, this is what we do for a living, it's just wonderful to see people really latch onto this and really feel that it's accessible, and then they too can make this own personal journey into the universe. And that's what really this book is about, the Stargazer's Atlas. It's to give people that inspiration to go and explore for themselves.
Bottom line, this book has come out at exactly the right time. The book is Stargazer's Atlas, the ultimate guide to the night sky. Thank you once again, Andrew, for being on the program with us.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And I invite people to visit my website, thenightskyguy.com. I also have an exclusive offer for people who come to my website who would like to order this book, to have this book. I'm offering personally signed, dedicated copies, and that ship internationally. So if people would like it, they can visit my website, thenightskyguy.com, for grabbing their own copies.
Thank you, Andrew.
My pleasure. Clear skies.
Andrew Fazekas, the Night Sky Guy, and the author of National Geographic's Stargazer's Atlas, the ultimate guide to the night sky. You can check out his website at thenightskyguy.com, and as Andrew just mentioned, you can go there to order your very own signed copy of his great new book. You can also go to my website at thestufffile.com to the page for this show, which is show number 0692, and you'll find the links to Andrew's site. You're listening to the Stuff File program with me, Peter Anthony Holder. Well, boys and girls, it's that moment you've all been waiting for. It's time now for the Idiot of the Day.
And now it's time for the Strange Things Adults Do. The Stuff File presents the Idiot of the Day.
A Missouri man has pleaded guilty to robbing a local Bank of America branch using a demand note written on the back of his own birth certificate, and while he was wearing an ankle monitor related to a previous case. He did it all, he admitted to the authorities, to prove a point to his lover. though it's unclear from court records precisely what point he was trying to make. 30-year-old Michael Conley Lloyd, and let it be known that this is one of the few Lloyds with only one L. Anyway, Michael Conley Lloyd entered his plea to one count of bank robbery in federal court. Investigators determined that Lloyd had used a black Dodge Ram pickup truck as a getaway vehicle. A phone call 10 minutes after the heist drew the local constabulary to Lloyd. The call came from the boyfriend of Lloyd's roommate. Lloyd was quickly located at the Lazy Acres mobile home park where he lived. There's so much of that sentence that says so much. Anyway, Lloyd said he threw his birth certificate and ID out the window as he fled. He said he began passing police cars responding to the robbery. He became scared and started throwing the money he stole out the window of the truck. He then texted his roommate and told her to tell the police that her truck had been stolen. He also told her to start listening to her police scanner. He then called his lover, Ashley, to tell her what he had done. He knew very quickly, however, that the jig was up. Lloyd told investigators that he expected to receive prison time and he would take full responsibility for whatever punishment he was to receive. The sum total of Bank of America's loss was listed at a whopping $754. Lloyd could face up to 20 years behind bars and a $250,000 fine. By the way, let me describe his appearance during the robbery. Lloyd was wearing a gray cutoff t-shirt with blue gym shorts and an orange shoe on his right foot, which I'm assuming was hiding his ankle monitor. There was nothing to say what the shoe on his left foot looked like, but since they pointed out the one on his right foot, let's just go on the assumption they didn't match. He also had profanity tattooed on his neck, and I posted his mugshot on the Stuff File program fan page and also on Twitter, if that's still around. Now, normally at this juncture, I would start by saying, why, oh why, and point out all of the idiocy that this week's entry has done. But frankly, there's just too much here. So let's just cut to the chase and say, Lloyd, with one L, you're an idiot!
Gee, I'm only a kid, but even I know you're an idiot.
And that's it for this edition of the Stuff File program, number 0692. Hope you enjoyed it. The website is thestufffile.com, and once again, stuff is spelled S-T-U-P-H, where you'll find information and links on all of our guests by going to the weekly Stuff File page. Just look for the corresponding program number, and once again, that's 0692. Email me at peter@thestufffile.com. You can also find me on Facebook and Twitter as PA Holder, and don't forget to check us out on patreon.com, where you can become a patron of the program. Hope to see you back here for our next show on the air, online, or as a download. We're coming to you from everywhere, including KDXRadio.com, TrueTalkRadio.com, over the air on World FM in New Zealand, MediaCore in Singapore, WLSLLP FM in Dade City, Florida, CKUW FM in Winnipeg, CFMU in Hamilton, CKLU in Sudbury, Local 107.3 FM in St. John, CHSR in Fredericton, and also streaming on just about any streaming service your little heart desires. That's it. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to the Stuff File program with Peter Anthony Holder, a presentation of Flying Fish Communications. Guests of the Stuff File program stay at their own homes.
Trust me, I'm the voice for this program. I know there's no budget for accommodations. I'm reading this on a futon.